All. This is Dr. Mobeen Sayed from drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So, I want to start off our chit chat today with a study. And in the meantime, if you can get your questions ready, then we'll go over those as well. I hope everyone is doing good. Let's start from this study. So, this is a study that is published in BMC Medicine, and it says risk for newly diagnosed diabetes after COVID 19, a systemic review and meta analysis. So, I remember discussing a study for SARS-CoV-1 that some of the patients of SARS-CoV-1 had diabetes started earlier, about 10 years earlier, compared to um, their group mates or age mates. So, here is a study now, which is actually a meta study. So this study is the researchers are from China and from US. So Joseph here, he is from College of Medicine, Pennsylvania, and the rest are from China. Here is what this study says, and it is concerning. The study says, and let me show you the number of people included in this study. They are about 40 million. So nine studies with nearly 40 million participants were included. Overall, and please pay attention to this one, this is really interesting. Overall, scary maybe as well. Overall, the incidence of diabetes after COVID 19 was 15.53 per thousand person years, and the range is 7.9 to 25.64. And the relative risk of diabetes after COVID 19 infection was elevated, and the risk was how much was it elevated? 1.62, and the range was 1.45 to 1.80. That is bad. The relative risk of type 1 diabetes was 1.48, and the range was 1.26 to 1.75, and type 2 diabetes was 1.70, 1.32 to 2.19. And before I continue presenting this one, to those folks who would immediately become a group to say that somehow presenting such studies is a ding on the value of getting infected instead of the vaccine, and they will start hammering that why is this study being presented. Please understand that this is data. We should know the data. Not everyone is going to say that I need to go get an infection, and not everyone should do that. So we should be aware of the data, then we can make our decisions. We are responsible for our decisions and the outcomes of those. But gaining knowledge, having this information isn't a bad thing. And I am happy to present this. So the relative risk of type 1 diabetes, so children with COVID, had an increased rate or risk, I should say relative risk, of developing type 1 diabetes, and that rate was 1.48, and the range was 1.27 to 1.75. And for type 2 diabetes, relative risk was 1.70, so almost 70.7 times more. I shouldn't say 0.7, 70%. So 1.32 to 2.19 folds compared to non-COVID patients. Then, so remember, this is a 40 million people um, study, or combination of 9 studies at all ages. There was a statistically significant positive association between infection with COVID 19 and the risk of diabetes. Now, this is the scary part, which was kind of concerning. So, lesser than 18 years of age, relative risk 1.72, and the range was 1.19 to 2.49 folds. So, that's lesser than 18 years, 1.72. folds was the relative risk, and more than 18 years or 18, 1.63, and greater than 65 years, 1.68. So actually lesser than 18 years had the highest relative risk. The relative risk of diabetes in different gender groups was 2. The risk of diabetes increased 1.17 fold, and the range was 1.02 to 1.34 fold after COVID 19 infection compared to patients with general upper respiratory tract infection. So, other patients who may have had similar upper respiratory tract infections, compared to them, COVID infection had 1.17 fold increase. Patients with severe COVID 19 were at higher risk, 1.67, of diabetes after COVID 19. The risk, 1.95, of diabetes was highest in the first 3 months after COVID 19. These results remained after taking confounding factors into account. So you take the age stratification and gender and the socioeconomic statuses and other confounders, you take into account all of them and then look at it again. And even then, this these stats stand. So this is very important. And this was observed with SARS-CoV-1 as well. So here in this study, they did not try to give a pathology. So I think we have to go through those 9 studies individually to see what kind of pathogenesis they talked about. But the SARS-CoV-1 study that I had discussed in the past, in the beginning, that study had postulated that the viral infection and the pancreatitis or inflammation of the pancreas and destruction of the beta cells was the cause of accelerated diabetes. Now, type 1 diabetes, this is my conjecture, and once again, I could be wrong. Uh, and once again, by what I mean is, I say this all the time that I could be wrong. Type 1 could be not just inflammation of the pancreas, but actually autoimmune disease setting in, which continues to and results in attack the pancreas and results in type 1 diabetes. So there could be an autoimmune component here, not just the destruction, one-time destruction of the pancreas. So then they conclude, after COVID-19, patients of all ages and genders had an elevated incidence and relative risk for a new diagnosis of diabetes. Particular attention should be paid during the first 3 months of follow-up after COVID-19 for new onset diabetes. So if I can now look at the um, limitations as well, just to complete the message here, and they have, as you can see, they've done a very thorough job. So limitations are: number one, all included studies used a retrospective design, and all studies used the breadth and depth of large electronic healthcare databases to construct cohorts and define health characteristics based on validated definitions, which cannot exclude misclassification bias, particularly for diabetes types. So type 1 or type 2 or others. Second, some of the studies used contemporary control, not excluding the possibility. So some of the studies said that we're going to have controls, meaning those who did not have the infection, and we're going to see the incidence and risk of diabetes in them for comparison to COVID. So some of the studies used contemporary controls, not excluding the possibility that some individuals may be infected with SARS-CoV-2 and have not been tested, which could bias the result towards a null hypothesis. So there could be some which we thought healthy individuals may have had COVID, not gotten tested, and became part of the control group, which would create a bias towards the null hypothesis. Third, because the included studies were conducted in different countries and in different regions within the same country, difference in national and regional care policies are expected, for which this meta analysis could not be adapted or adjusted. Fourth, the study design were heterogeneous, prospective cohort and retrospective cohort studies, as the number of available prospective cohort studies on this topic remains small. More high quality studies are needed to confirm our results. So, now some more commentary on this one. It is actually possible to develop diabetes because of stress, and body under stressful state, inflammatory state, COVID infection is actually under a lot of stress as well, and it can develop diabetes because of stress. What happens is during the stress, the stress hormones are released, epinephrine, norepinephrine. Uh, those hormone then steroids. These hormones then they cause resistance to insulin, causing a diabetes-like uh, situation, and that can sometimes reset. However, if there is also damage to pancreas, and if there is also development of an autoimmune disease that attacks the pancreas, then certain uh, diabetes that can just continue can develop. So, one of the conclusions they made was they said, let me read their conclusion. I know I'm not sharing my screen. Let's do that. Their conclusion was particular attention should be paid during the first 3 months of follow up after COVID 19 for new onset diabetes. So, of course, there is an elevated risk, but if you're a provider, if you're a physician, or if you're a patient, just pay more attention. My request, in addition to this, will be to make sure that you reduce your stress levels so that your body can bounce back instead of staying in the stressful state. So that will be one help. And even during the infection, as low a stress level as we can maintain will be less, you know, pathogenic towards developing diabetes. At the same time, if pancreas is going to be attacked by the virus or by the antibodies, then that management has to be done. So, Krista, in general, when we have stress hormones released in our body, which occurs when we are under psychological stress or emotional stress or physical stress due to even infections, what happens is our body, those stress hormones, in general, they try to make sure that body does not use the glucose for things other than muscle and brain, and our body by design try to create resistance to insulin for other tissues, but this can become pathological. Okay, so now let's see some questions. So Danilo says, sir, is there any other way to synthesize specific antibodies for SARS-CoV-2 without vaccination? Here in Sri Lanka, people believe herbs can create specific antibodies without infection. So that's not correct. Herbs cannot create them, but of course, the infection itself can do it, otherwise, vaccines. And then, of course, we talk about monoclonal antibodies that are administered from outside. But I have never seen an herb that will synthesize specific antibodies for a virus. This is possible that herbs have molecules in them that are even used for adjuvants. For example, in the Johnson and Johnson, was it Johnson and Johnson or actually Novavax Matrix M? That is a bark of a tree, or one component of that adjuvant is a bark. So it is possible that herbs can donate molecules that can cause immune system to be triggered, and that will then help immune system to be geared up, but you have to provide the antigen as well to develop antibodies. And my last couple of discussions, especially with the spike protein, one common message I saw multiple times was when I said that there is a hope that there is possibly no permanent damage and the patients can start recovering, then of course somebody left this message. I say of course because it is kind of obvious that they would do it. Is that, well, do you not know that these things can cause permanent damage to nerves? So, antibodies. So, it is impossible for me in one talk to go over the whole pathology of what antibodies can do and cannot do. It's impossible. And secondly, I have been presenting for about 3 years now. And I believe that there are so many discussions already done that I cannot just keep representing all 3 years of work in every single lecture so that it is as holistic and complete as possible. So, yes, I said that yesterday or day before in one of the chit chats that as much as there is help, physicians and providers should make sure that they keep the immune system modulated so that the damage doesn't occur while they are helping the patient. And I have also said it many times that it is important to keep the patient protected while the basic pathology is taken care of. So sometimes I feel that some folks want to add their comment that, hey, look, this can happen too. But instead of just adding it, they have to first say, you did not mention this, and here is. So just add your comment. It's an educational area, so your contribution is welcome. So word says, has anyone gotten arthritis after having COVID? So after COVID, joint pains or muscle pains can occur, and that these can occur with long COVID too. Joint pains can occur for two kind of reasons. There are many reasons. Once again, people would say, well, you missed this reason, but understand the two primary possibilities. One is the direct attack on the joint surfaces by antibodies and inflammation of them. And the second one, even clotting can do it because the blood vessels, if the blood is clotting, then the joint surfaces will get less blood and they'll make less fluids, and that would cause issues too. Plus, the one is the antibodies, and the second one is muscles. So if a person's muscles have become weak or they are aching, then we try to not support our joints correctly, and that incorrect support or less force or power by the muscles puts risk or stress on the joints, and the joints start bending or moving in unexpected angles, and that also causes pain. Okay, so chilling guy says, can lung adenocarcinoma can occur? It is not, so far I haven't seen an association of SARS-CoV-2 causing the adenocarcinoma, but adenocarcinoma separately can occur. So Denise says joint pains often, of course, inflammatory waves can also cause joint pains. Denise says mast cells were found by Stanford in May 2019 to be involved in osteoarthritis mechanisms. Thank you. Okay, so what else is happening? That's an interesting question. Any Ben Fortiamin says, does science study the vibrations of viruses? I have not come across that. Maybe. John Snyder says, I can tell you that when I am infected with COVID-19, my fasting blood sugar is over 400, where it is normally 115 to 135. Okay, excellent. I don't see any more questions. So let me look at any other concepts that I wanted to discuss. Otherwise, we will then hang up. Okay, just a quick note and then we can hang up. One, the Epoch Time, I think, reported it that in the court, when FDA was asked that you were talking about ivermectin and not to take it, FDA took the position that that was just a recommendation, no orders, no, we were not trying to stop it. And that is just such a um, incorrect statement. Remember, I have actually presented FDA had been sending letters to the American medical associations and other medical associations. They had been sending letters to the boards, insurance companies on behalf of FDA like organizations were sending letters. People's licenses were being cancelled, their licenses were being looked at. So these "you're not a horse, you're not a cow" like tweets were coming out. They were giggling about this CNN's coverage of their, and then if to throw the hands out and say, well, that was just not a recommendation, we just said it. That's not interesting. Similarly, as I said a few days ago, that when somebody is vaccine injured and they are now taken away from the insurance coverage because it was really not a recommendation, and so if they took it, it was their own act, and because of that, insurance has the right not to cover the injury. That is some other level of cruelty that I think is happening in the US. Okay, so let's see some questions and then we. M. Gregory, this is a very good question. I do not have an answer for this one. Vitamin C pills affect estrogen levels. Uh, they are antioxidants and they are the ones that would help T helper 1 pathways to be taken. But I did not know that they would affect estrogen levels. So, not that I know of, but I can look it up. So Mbal says, could you please do a video showing how to do the WHERE's form on reporting? Okay, we can do that. We can probably do that together. Maybe we can add my wife's injury. Parth says, what's the power of your eyes? Very powerful eyes. Yes, I did go over the form and how to fill that in the past as well, and how to find the reports as well. Okay, Daniel Sanchez says, if the issue is the activation of ACE2 and therefore a local increase in angiotensin 2, would AT1R blockers help with side effects? So that is a very good question. So first of all, the issue is actually suppression of the ACE2, right? Because when the SARS-CoV-2 spike or the antibodies that connect with the ACE2 is downregulated, plus it is occupied. ACE1 or ACE has been now overwhelming. And because of that, angiotensin 2 is more, as you are alluding to, and angiotensin 1 to 7, or the conversion of 2 to 1 to 7 is less. And so anti-inflammatory effects are changed, vasoconstrictor, vasodilator effects are imbalanced. So it is a very interesting question that, hey, if we blocked angiotensin 1 or angiotensin receptors, 1 receptors, will that help? And so there has been so much curiosity. There have been some studies as well, but there has never been a conclusive study that said that people who are taking angiotensin receptor blockers, they have less, um, they are at lesser risk of COVID. So this was from the very beginning of the COVID. This discussion has been going on. I read America's Endocrinology Society's statement, and they don't plus the heart associations, and so they do not recommend changing the drug for this reason, either quitting or starting, because they say there is not enough indicators that it helps. Very good question. So J. says, Dr. Bean, have you heard of lumbrokinase for muscle pain disintegration? So I was actually preparing to do a talk about this. So yes, it is on my radar. I have to present the mechanism. Nattokinase and lumbrokinase. So Augie says, is it possible for niacin to correct Krebs cycle, NAD pathways, etc.? Can. I would suspect that and if you watch my previous talks, for the mitochondrial disruption, where then the Krebs cycle becomes disrupted, more interesting and more um, quicker pathways are to give L-citrulline, L-arginine. So what happens is L-arginine or levoarginine goes through the pathways and becomes L-citrulline. Then L-citrulline goes back and becomes levoarginine, and that cycle continues. So providing these two can be very helpful for mitochondrial uh, rejuvenation, let's call it, or dysfunctions, reduction of the dysfunction. Similarly, methylene blue in low doses has been very, very good, because it is um, methylene blue is an auto oxidizing agent. It provides an electron and it takes an electron, accepts it and donates it. And so it works with the electron transport chains complex 4 and provides an electron, then accepts an electron, and that causes the electron transport chain in the mitochondria to start working correctly. Once it starts working correctly, the mitochondrial functions become rehabilitated. That causes the whole cell to become functionally better, and the stress signals of the cell go down. So methylene blue is very good, L-citrulline is very good, L-arginine is very good. Then the near infrared light, near infrared, not sauna. Sauna has some other benefits. It has benefits too. Near infrared has specific benefits for mitochondrial repair, and near infrared not more than 10 minutes. Sauna at a separate time, about 20 minutes at least. And these cause a lot of helpful mitochondrial uh, corrections. And I've done these talks for FLCCC on the FLCCC channel. Very good question, Augie. Okay, so um, Jan says, what is prion disease. That will be a separate topic, but prion are really very tiny pieces of genetic material that are not even viruses. And prions can actually cause brain to become mushed up. So, whenever I visualize prions, I think these are tiny little microscopic needles that get stuck in our tissues, and then inflammation occurs, and that tissue gets in trouble. But I'll do a detailed discussion. This is just an overall bigger picture. So, Jane, this is a very good question. For the T helper 1 and T helper 2 pathway, I believe you're talking about. So, what we saw was that uh, more than the daily RDA of vitamin C, double or triple. Some doctors actually even go in grams, and it has been that way. But, anyways, if you go more than the normal RDA for vitamin C, that is good enough to move towards T helper 1. The vitamin D, it's really, if somebody is already deficient in vitamin D, then they're already not doing a correct balance, anyways. So for them to keep on vitamin D with higher levels is fine. Someone who has correct levels, and correct levels, let's say 39, normal is supposed to be 29 nanogram per milliliter, I believe. So 39 and above. If somebody has that, then up to 4,000 international units is possibly okay. Glenn Swank says, is it possible to have another lecture on diabetes? Even 5 gram of carbs will skyrocket my blood sugar. Yes, we can do that. We can do that. Denise says, I use lumbrokinase. It's the strongest of the 3 popular enzymes. Denise, you have the most medicines with the allergies. So Embal says, how can anyone do a study on COVID and diabetes without taking vitamin D into account, since childhood deficiency is a factor in type 1? Even childhood deficiency is a factor. However, type 1 is a very different disease, and it's not just correctable by vitamin D. But your point is taken that yes, generally for COVID, studies should include vitamin D levels, because that seems to be an important confounding factor. Okay, so I think, so here's a question. Purple Mojo says, should vitamin C be split up during the day since it is water soluble and the excess excreted? Sure. And there are doctors who actually give a large dose, and the body picks up what it needs, and the rest will be excreted. So yes, sure, you can provide it in multiple doses, in multiple boluses. So J. Ann says, is every sauna infrared? So I think that many of the sauna bulbs have the infrared components to them as well. However, I did a discussion of a study. Um, I do not know from FLCCC platform or from here, where I discussed That study showed that near infrared, if given for more than 10 minutes, loses its effect, while sauna, that is far infrared and above that, so also think about it this way, that sauna is thermal, it produces temperature, it changes temperature a lot. Near infrared doesn't, it just changes even after 10 minutes, maybe slight change. So sauna needs at least 20 minutes of exposure. So they are not compatible with each other. So there are bulbs that actually have near infrared and sauna, but then they need to be taken in separate doses. So D. Mercado says, for a long COVID patient suffering from prolonged fatigue and brain fog after a no histamine diet, antihistamine, intermittent fasting, what might you recommend trying next? So this is something that I was reading Dr. Pierre Corey's experience as well. I have some experience for the patients that have been talking with me as well. So, and for my own self, although I don't believe I have long COVID, but for my own um, brain activity as well, I find MCT oil and coconut oil to be magical. It is really, these two are really magical. So, my habit is in the morning to take 2 shots of MCT oil. Coconut oil, I'm a little more careful because the the specific preparation that I have is, it causes cough. So I mix it with my food or with my other things during the day, or I kind of uh, paste it a little on my bread, and that is how I take it. These two are wonderful. In addition to that, the L-arginine and L-citrulline, or there is a supplement that is called, and I do not have any commercial interest with them. I think it is called Healthy Heart. I'll have to tell you that that supplement um, has been magical. I want to read the name of the supplement, so if you don't mind. Um, box. I always, so this is called Cardio Miracle. Cardio Miracle. Let me show it to you. I was actually planning to inform the cool beans here to be aware of the Cardio Miracle. Although it is Cardio Miracle, it has been um, reported by folks with the post COVID or post vaccine neurological outcomes that they say this has been really helping them. Cardio Miracle. I believe this is the one. I have no commercial interest with them. I have nothing with them. But some doctors are reporting that using Cardio Miracle has really been helping the refractory patients, meaning those patients that are not responding to other things, they respond to this cocktail very well. So it may be worth a try. Okay, so Embol says, what are the ingredients? Let me click this, and it says the complete nitric oxide solution, nutritional, heart healthy, levoarginine, liquid electrolyte drink mix, and then the complete nitric oxide. So if I click on, okay, here, So this one has more 50 plus ingredients, including L-arginine, AKG, L-citrulline. These two by themselves are magical. Ornithine, carnitine, taurine, ribose, vitamin D, antioxidants, organic beetroot powder, hawthorn berry, watermelon extract, estrogen, all absorbed through our unmatched proprietary dual pathway delivery system. Well, that is kind of commercial part of it. Um, Cardio Miracle, along with proper lifestyle choices, may have a positive effect on your flavor, directions, blah. So Glenn says, I put coconut oil in my coffee. It tastes great. Very good. Awesome. Doug says 50 plus. They may change the quantity, it seems. Maybe, but still, those who are refractory, I would repeat it, those patients who said other things, all those other measures have not helped, they have been reporting that this has been helping. And as you can tell, I read that from one of the emails from another doctor who was also talking about it. So John says, Dr. Bean, did you see in the news that the recent bankrupt FTX gave over 18 million to early COVID-19 researchers that casted doubt on ivermectin and hydroxy? Yes, I read that, including the Together trial. Yes, I read that. So Travers, have you seen the Yale study acknowledging vaccine injury? I have not, but I think you had put the comment before as well that either you or someone was participating in it. It will be really interesting. So let's say if I look for Yale vaccine injury study. Okay, let's see. Is this the one? The Yale Listen study. Thank you for being interested. Listen stands for Listen to Immune Symptoms and Treatment Experiences Now. The purpose of this study is to understand long COVID post vaccine adverse events and the corresponding immune responses by collecting information about symptoms and medical history from participants who are members of patient community and by collecting blood and saliva samples from some participants. We are recruiting from the Yugo Health Kindred COVID-19 community. So is this the one? It seems to be the one, the Listen study. You are eligible, are a member of the Hugo Health Kindred COVID-19 community, are currently 18, speak English, how the study works, how to join the study, if I change my mind. Okay, so possibly this is the one. Bine Beinbaum says, is it antibodies that attack the joints after vaccines or COVID infections? So antibodies, somebody made this comment yesterday as well. Antibodies, by their presence, any kind of antibody, anti-antibodies or not antibodies, meaning the first version and then the anti-idiotype antibodies, antibodies presence alone can cause inflammation. Antibody, if you look at the biological functions of the antibody, if I can, I have started using my broken what is this um, tablet again, because other was just giving me too much trouble. So imagine if this is the antibody, and then, and this is the first antibody, right? And then we make another antibody that is against this one, and that other one is anti-antibody. Let me make that in the red. So really the correct name for this anti-antibody is anti-idiotype antibody. And there is a reason for this. The idiotype here is this part, the variable part of an antibody is called idiotype. Why we call it idiotype? Because idio means unknown or unexpected, right? So idiotype is, we do not know how an antibody's um, variable region will look like. That is why we call it idio type. An anti-idiotype would mean an antibody that is targeted on this part. Now, to go back to your question, if we take a normal antibody, the first antibody, meaning antibody, not anti-idiotypical antibody, its job is to connect with the antigen, and this binding, just mere binding, has many good outcomes. For example, imagine if this is a virus, and imagine virus for a second to be a car, and now you have coated that car all around with weird bricks and things on it. That car will not be able to run anymore because it is just coated with these tree branches and things. These are antibodies. So that is a mechanical effect of an antibody. Similarly, antibodies can be secreted in our saliva, IgAs, with this little joining chain here, and they are present in saliva or in our fluids, in our body secretions. And their function is also to provide this mechanical barrier. They are like little wrenches that are floating around in the fluids, and if there is an antigen that they recognize, they will bind with that antigen, and they would prevent that antigen to enter our cells or cause damage. That can happen with the SARS-CoV-2. Imagine when IgA is produced and it is present in our wet surfaces, then if more SARS-CoV-2 comes in, these antibodies are just going to trap it right there and reduce its entry into the cells. So one is disabling the offending agent. That is a very mechanical behavior. Second problem with this, so I'll present both the benefit and the not so benefits. Now the problem with this is that this antigen antibody complex causes inflammation. But if we stay on mechanical side for a second, this complex can get stuck in various places. For example, it can get stuck on the filtration units that we have. Filtration units in joints. We have filtration units in kidney. We have filtration units in many of the barriers, and these complexes can go and get stuck there. And that is a mechanical problem, just like if we have those little gutters, and after fall the leaves fall in those gutters and block them. So now we have a mechanical problem. That is what antibodies can end up causing. That doesn't mean antibodies are always bad. We cannot live a single day without antibodies. We'll die if they're not helping. So these are mechanical. Then there are chemical functions. Once antibody connects with an antigen, then this antibody can then connect with various cells. And those cells, for example, it can connect with macrophages to be eaten up. It can connect with natural killer cells. It can connect with B cells, mast cells. And that is, it would activate those cells, or it would cause ADE type behavior where the uptake of the complex is done. And it's really not, I shouldn't call it antibody dependent enhancement, but the enhancement can actually be positive as well. When the antibody binds here, the whole complex is eaten up and removed from the circulation, including the antigen. That is a good biological function. Similarly, when an antibody is present somewhere, it can, when it is connected with an antigen, there are areas in the antibody on the heavy chain that open up like doors, and over there complement system can come and attach, and complement fixation occurs, which would then cause little membrane attack complexes are formed and the pathogen or the virus is destroyed, or even the cell is destroyed. The point is, all of these things can happen with any kind of antibody, regardless of it being an anti-idiotype or simple antibody. Anti-idiotype has, in case of SARS-CoV-2, an additional function, and that is that because its binding region looks like a spike, it can bind the class 1, as we discussed yesterday. The class 1 neutralizing antibodies and their anti-idiotype antibodies can actually bind with the ACE2 receptor. And once that binding occurs, then we know what happens next. We have done this discussion many times. So now if I answer your question again, Bine Bum, is it antibodies that attack the joints after vaccines or COVID infection? Infection can do it as well, the virus itself, or simple antibodies, or anti-idiotype antibodies, or other inflammatory products can do it. Even cells can do it. The inflammatory cells can become activated, just like Denise talked about mast cells. And they can cause degranulations in various parts of the tissues, various tissues, and causing pains and aches and destruction in those areas. So Ramnik is here. Ramnik is talking about music wavelengths. Um, so Skater says, does MCT or coconut oil raises LDL cholesterol? And if so, does that really matter as much as it was once thought in the past? I am not sure. I'll have to check it out. But it is magical for brain fog, for neurological symptoms. Dr. Bean, have you seen or hear of the new SADS documentary movie making the rounds online? It's scary stuff. Can lumbrokinase dissolve those fibrin clots? Okay, so there are many things that can dissolve the fibrin clots. That's one. Secondly, please, I have been saying it again and again. Look at the empirical evidence around you. There is actually a truth that some people get injured by vaccine and some people get injured by SARS-CoV-2. However, there is a overall picture in front of us as well. For example, during this pandemic, about 500 million people got infected and about 6 million died. 6.3 million died. Not all of them died. That means infection is not detrimental to the death for everyone. And if 500 million were infected with symptoms and testing, then usually a huge number is also asymptomatically infected. That means we cannot say virus destroys everyone it infects. Similarly, vaccine also doesn't do this. And this is such a strange thing that we discuss education here. And whenever I discuss that vaccine will not be injurious to everyone, and similarly infection will not be injurious to everyone, people just do not stand that. They do not digest that at all. They want me to be on one side or the other, and I cannot be because I'm a doctor. I have to look at the whole picture. So yes, that video is making rounds, but that video is very far away, as far as I can think, from the reality around us. So please don't be scared, because that fear itself causes stress, and that in itself causes damage as well. But yes, there are many kinds of anti-clotting products that can help. Vin says nuances is every, yes. And this is just so much. I have said it many times. If I just became a fear mongerer, just someone who just wants to make up shit, then I think because of I think you may have seen that my studies of mechanisms and my love of mechanisms and explaining of them for medical students and nurses and doctors, that was my mission, to clarify the mechanism so they can think about them and treat patients well. And if I started making things up, how maybe I'll become very popular, but that will be so wrong. So we have to stay uh, within the available information and studies, and go from there. The studies would continue to evolve and the data would continue to come in, and we'll go from it. Is so funny, I see many times the comments are, they are under a study, discounting the study by saying I feel or I believe it is this way, and they're discounting a study with their belief. So anyways, um, M. Gregory says best to be neutral and not get caught up with divide and conquer. Actually, for a doctor's point of view, you have to be. It's not that I took an intentional neutral route. I am starting my Kindle. I want to show you something to prove that what I'm doing is actually what everyone should do. Let me show you. Let me first open the book. So I'm going to present. So this book here is Goodman Gilman. Goodman Gilman, for medical students, nursing students, doctors, undergrad level, not PhD. This is a god book. This used to be this big a book, and we'll keep it with us. And whenever we wanted to go thoroughly into a medicine and its effects, we will pick up Goodman Gilman. And let me show you any one drug in here. Let's say local anesthetics, right? And what I want to show you is how do they talk about it. So let's go to cocaine. So here they are presenting the chemistry of cocaine, then pharmacological actions and preparations. The clinical desired actions of cocaine are the blockade of nerve impulses as consequences of its long anesthetic properties and local vasoconstriction, secondary to inhibition of NET. Now, remember, this is clinically desirable action they're talking about. So imagine if somebody says, I don't like cocaine, or cocaine is not the right thing. They will become surprised that, well, here is a book that is talking about it being clinically desirable. At the same time, look at this, toxicity and its potential for abuse have steadily decreased the clinical uses of cocaine. So now they're also talking about toxicity. And it is not that this book is neutral. It is that this book's job is to present a chemical with its benefits and its harms. And actually, in good books, even a third category, that if harm becomes too much, it becomes a poison. If there is toxicity, then how do we reverse that? So if we continue, toxicity is due to reduced catecholamines uptake in both blah, and they talk about it. And they talk, currently cocaine is used primarily for topical anesthesia. So could you imagine that we, let's say, object on this book, and we say, you should either talk about cocaine is good or talk about cocaine is bad. We do not like you to present the good and bad of cocaine. Imagine how weird that would sound for this book. Here, anesthetic properties. Then they talk about lidocaine, for example, and once again, they'll do the same thing, pharmacological actions and preparations. And then they'll talk about ADME, so absorption and um, pharmacodynamics and so on, the the way it works in our body, and then toxicity. So once again, lidocaine toxicity. So if we know the toxicity, would we say this book should remove this molecule because it is talking about the toxicity? It should take a side. No, it is a medical book. It has to present benefits and side effects and then antidotes even. Look, clinical, it just talked about toxicity, and here is the clinical use. That is what I do with vaccines, for example. I discuss, here are the vaccines, here are their trials, here are their benefits, and here are their side effects. And here is how to try to help them. The and this problem of taking a side is actually all the way up to the leadership, even the healthcare leadership and the doctors, the mainstream, does not even want to talk about injury. They have this weird um, sacred belief that if we talked about vaccines problems, somehow that will cause people to become hesitant and we'll end up causing damage. That's actually a, I believe, a made up reason to be lazy and not do their homework to say, hey guys, vaccines do this, this vaccine in this cohort has done this, don't take this vaccine or don't do that. Similarly, there are another group of people who have picked up the side effects only and then have presented it as this will be the general outcome for everyone. And now half of the world is sitting waiting for the remaining half to die. Those who are vaccinated, the unvaccinated are waiting for them to die. And those who are vaccinated, they are thinking unvaccinated will be injured. This is such a weird state. But I don't have to take a political neutral position. That is the medicine. That is how medicine is done. So, anybody who takes a position, I've seen doctors who say all good with vaccine. And anyone who said anything negative or brought any toxic effect out, I'm going to attack them. And I'm seeing those who are uh, against the vaccines and have become against the vaccines recently would just attack everything vaccine. So sorry, your question triggered me. So let's go back to the purple says, if coconut oil has antimicrobial properties, does it harm gut bacteria? I did not know that coconut oil does that. So no, at least I use it every day as well. I haven't seen any gut changes or issues. John says, have you done a lecture in the past on heartburn, acid reflux, GERD? No. No. John, to be honest, what happens is anytime I go and take towards my route of presenting medicine again, the viewership just collapses. Sayyid Shujat says how to use methylene blue. So there are methylene blue is a prescription medicine. There are IV and oral preparations. IV is usually given for met hemoglobin 1 milligram per kilogram IV over 30 minutes. And then there are oral preparations as well. So the best way is to look at the preparation and discuss with the doctor to say how to use it or have the doctor prescribe it. But I'm not a proponent of zero point 0.5 to 1, more than zero point 0.5 to 1 milligram per kilogram. So, with this, Luffy has started speaking. So, my apologies for that little book rant, because every day people are commenting under my videos. If I talk about a vaccine, then they become upset. And if I talk about some side effect of the vaccine, then they become upset. And that is medicine. And unfortunately, it has become such a political thing that people expect you to have a side. Cool. So, with this, please like, subscribe, and share. There are some links in the description of this video. If you would like to support this work, you can buy me a coffee, you can use PayPal, you can become a Patreon member, or you can become a member of this YouTube channel, and other links are present in there as well. The best is, it is holidays as well. The best is, if you would like to take a plan for drbean.com. It is only $67 here only, and it is access to 900 videos, medical videos. So, with this, thank you very much. Have a good night, and hopefully, I'll see you tomorrow. But if not, happy Thanksgiving as well, and we will see each other soon. Kini, that is my pride that we are able to discuss these things the way these knowledges are emerging. We discuss them and we educate ourselves, and we use that information for ourselves and our loved ones without taking, without cornering ourselves. I have never painted ourselves in a corner to say we have now become anti-vaxxers or we have now become pro-vaxxers or blah. We have just kept going with the information, and we'll keep doing that. Thank you very much. I will see you again, and stay safe and blessed. Bye bye for now.